Good morning, colleagues. I am Tandam Daga, the Research Integrity Officer from the Department of Research Support, and I'm glad to see you all here, and thank you for honoring the invite. Today's session is about artificial intelligence. Our speakers are Dr. Rieta Visagie, Mr. Sidney Engelbrach, and Dr. Nikki Chano, who will join us later in the room. And we also have our director, Mr. Harry Bubabe, who will be our opening speaker today. So I thank Mr. B for coming and joining us and always being here to support us. And even though I sent this invite last minute, thank you for honoring this invite and always being part of the team. I thank you, Mr. B. I'll be handing over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tando. Am I audible? Am I? Okay, thank you, because I was really worried because I saw Tando bending, and I say, is it really what I'm going to do for the next 10 minutes, just bending and bending? A very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us at this workshop. My name is Harry Maishebo Pape. Kakele khatla ke letebele ke stogolo sa banareng ke khomya matula ke mothobo letebela mela o shikina wa shikina lona o tswara bothata. As it was already mentioned, I'm the Director Research Support responsible for the operationalization and implementation of the Research and Innovation Strategy, not only to support researchers, but also to support the research activities at this university, including this session, colleagues. And one is also responsible for managing research, information administration of internal and external research grants, research ethics and integrity, managing research support programs, and overall coordination and monitoring of the progress towards achieving the set targets. You have seen already in the advert that this workshop aims to deepen our understanding and application of responsible artificial intelligence principles within the realm of research. Throughout this session, vital and ethical consideration will be explored. Policy implication, accountability mechanism, and governance frameworks relevant to responsible use of artificial intelligence in research settings. Colleagues, you will agree with me that over the past few years, a rapid and disruptive acceleration of progress in artificial intelligence has occurred, driven by significant advances in widespread data availability, computing powers, and machine learning. As a result of that, artificial intelligence is featured regularly in the news and is central focus at many levels and in many contexts. Around the world, academia stakeholders, including governments, universities, and research institutions, are discussing artificial intelligence impact on research and education. For instance, in the UK, Joint Information System Committee, which runs the National Center of Artificial Intelligence across the tertiary education sector, is publishing a wealth of documentation on the use of artificial intelligence in education and research. It's examining policies for artificial intelligence in science and discussing implications of artificial intelligence governance, while the United States Senate has introduced legislation in high-risk artificial intelligence applications, including the use of biometric data for research, innovation, and accountability. You will agree with me that artificial intelligence provides many opportunities for different sectors. However, it also harbors risks, such as the large-scale generation of misinformation and other unethical uses with significant societal consequences. Research is one of the sectors that artificial intelligence could most significantly disrupt. Artificial intelligence has great potential to accelerating scientific discovery and improving the effectiveness and pace of research and verification processes. Positive example of the use of these two artificial intelligence tools by researchers including producing text, summarizes from different sources across extremely large corpus quickly and automatically retrieving and contextualizing a wide body of knowledge. However, the technology also entails the risk of abuse. Some risks are due to the total technical limitations, and others have to do with the intentional or unintentional use of the tool in ways that erode sound research practices. Other risks for research could stem from the proprietary nature of some of the tools or the concentration on the ownership. The impact of artificial intelligence on research and various aspects of the scientific processes calls for a reflection. For example, when working with the text, like summarizing papers, brainstorming, or exploring ideas or drafting or translating. In many respects, these tools could harm research integrity and raise questions about the ability of our current models to combat deceptive scientific practices and misinformation. There should be an important step to prevent misuse and ensure that artificial intelligence plays a positive role in improving research practices. The development of a robust framework for artificial intelligence in scientific research is critical, and it cannot be the sole responsibility of policymakers. Universities, research institutes, funding bodies, research libraries, learned societies, publishers and researchers at all stages of their careers are essential in shaping the discussion on artificial intelligence and how it can best serve the public interest in research and in research practices based on the current state of the technology and the surrounding policy landscape. In light of this fast-moving and ongoing debates on artificial intelligence, it seems, therefore, timely and appropriate that we have such an important session today on responsible use of artificial intelligence in research, deliberating what constitutes adequate and desirable use of artificial intelligence in research, now and in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us and welcome. We are looking forward to engaging you on this important and vital and critical topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. P. I'll be now handing over to Ms. Tato Masinga to introduce Dr. Rieta Fisachi so she can read it and you can guys hear it clearly. Thank you.
Just a quick word. Good morning, colleagues. I'm here to introduce one of our presenters, Dr. Rieta Fisachi, who is prominent in Africa's research ethics governance community. In 2014, she established the Research Integrity Office here in Unisa, catalyzing research ethics reform on both national and international levels. Over the past 5 years, she has been dedicated to indigenizing research ethics governance. Dr. Visagie has championed policy changes, conducted research, initiated capacity building programs for academic staff and research ethics committees, and facilitated also social dialogues to challenge research practices that may disadvantage indigenous knowledge systems. As the co-editor of Social Sciences Research Ethics in Africa, she has made significant contributions to the discourse on ethical considerations in research. She provides advisory services to several African higher education institutions, focusing on responsible research and ethical conduct. She is dedicated to advancing the position of research management in the Southern African Development Community, SADC in short. She holds a position as a committee member of the Southern African Research and Innovation Association. She continues supervising doctoral candidates, and her research niche focuses on indigenizing research management. Over to you, Dr. Visagie.
Thank you, colleagues. What an honor and privilege to be with you this morning and to be in a session where we can see many of you actually in person. We are honestly in a situation where I think we are missing out by not seeing each other more in this fashion, and I believe that we will have a very interactive engagement on a topic that applies to all of us. I think a pertinent question to start would be to ask how many of you used AI during this past week? I actually expected more, but I think that AI is absolutely an amazing tool to provide us with the opportunity to have partner in our scholarly journey, someone that we can ask relevant questions to, someone that would come up with pretty nice answers for us. And I agree with what Mr. Bupapi said. It could be a pitfall in some instances, but I believe that the value and the benefits of AI can actually provide an amazing resource for researchers to excel in the work that they do. And I thought that it might be important for us to just consider what research integrity and responsible research is all about. And in essence, it is about creating public trust in the work that we do as scholars. And public trust is vital then for evidence-based decision-making. It is vital for policy making. It is vital also for governments to provide money to spend on R&I matters. It is critical for us to have public trust when we consider the management of global crises, such as COVID-19, climate change. There has been research done that indicate that if there is higher trust, there would be higher compliance with certain health or public health measures. And if we consider, for instance, COVID-19, if we look at trust in that situation, there is clear evidence that trust compelled individuals actually to abide by even the non-pharmaceutical measures that was instituted by governments based on research. There was more vaccine compliance also with trust in science. The same with collective climate change adherence or activities, individual activities to promote a better protection of our environment. So again then, globally scientists are luckily among the most trusted actors in society, and science is still held in high regard. But a recent study that's currently in preprint indicates that there is, unfortunately, epistemic and cultural authority challenges. Specifically, there's a decline in trust of science, and this is then resulted to mis- and disinformation. It is resulted to historical transgressions, the rise in misconduct, the reproducibility crisis, also conspiracy theories, and then a lot of this has actually to do with anti-science attitudes. And if we consider trust in science, I consulted the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer involving 28 countries and more than 32,000 respondents, and South Africa is included as one of the countries that participated in the Edelman Trust Barometer, and there is a clear indication then that there is a decline in authority. And you will see that the finding, and this is the 24 study, the finding indicates that I trust each to tell me the truth about new innovations and technologies. And if you look at the findings, scientists and actually someone like me are equally trusted if we consider the findings. And what is very interesting is that I think I experience it daily in my personal life. For instance, if I would have some medical challenge or issue that I am sharing with my friend and colleague Tanya, within minutes I would get something from a credible internet source where she would actually share ideas with me, views on how I can help myself. So evidence then that we actually start to trust people like us more and more in terms of the advice and the guidance that they would give us based on their involvement also then in the internet. And the study is also indicating that there is that acceptance of innovation is currently at stake. You will see if we focus specifically on AI, we are at a crossroad because there's basically resistance against AI as well as enthusiasm. So there is in a way almost a bipolar situation when we consider the acceptance of AI. Moving on, governments lack competence to regulate emerging innovations, and this is a big challenge because if government regulators do not understand and do not put in adequate policies, legislation to guide emerging technologies, it will also taint trust in science. And you will see that in South Africa there was also an indication that there's a lack of trusting government in terms of the regulation then of innovations. Trust in science is then also reflected in institutions and how institutions manage the innovations. And the study indicated that there is low trust if there is a perception that it is poorly managed versus when there's actually a perception that institutions are managed the innovations well. Scientists and experts are expected to lead on implementation of innovation, and you will see that there's a call then for scientists to be actively involved in leading these innovations, and they are also referring in this study to the role of ethicists to confirm then the validity and the use of AI technologies. Another finding was that to earn acceptance, it is important then for us to show that innovation has been vetted by scientists and by ethicists. And you will note then also with AI that this is specifically relevant to that innovation as well. Trust in science is then further evident if there is a voice given to those that use the AI, and listening has been identified then as a top 3 trust builder. So we should actually ask ourselves, how do we promote dialogue in this context to elicit the fears from our stakeholders, to elicit the advantages of what AI can bring to us in the institution. There should be more acceptance then when people feel they have much control over how the innovations affect their lives. And I think that we often are in a situation where we actually feel that we may not have sufficient control, specifically then in the absence of guidelines to use AI. And there's also more acceptance among those with high confidence that the innovation will actually positively influence their life. So I thought that these findings from the Trust Barometer can be quite useful for us as an institution when we consider how should we move forward, how have we moved forward, and I'm sure that Dr. Nikki will tell you about the initiatives that has been implemented within the Unisa context, the plans that we have, but I think important then is that mismanagement of innovation are likely to ignite backlash. So it is critical for us to have a very clear plan forward in terms of how we are going to provide support, how we are planning to promote responsible conduct of research, what would be our strategies, and then how can we have a sound implementation plan. If we move on to the second one, there's reference that we should partner with industry stakeholders, but also then that science must integrate in society. The study revealed that scientists do not communicate effectively with public. And we know that. I mean, there are numerous initiatives at Unisa concerning science communication to improve the way that we communicate to the public. And this was again raised as something that we have to work on as scientists. The last suggestion was then that we must get control over the future. If we want to use AI effectively, we need to understand what it entails, what are the pitfalls, what are the advantages, and we must continuously build our own competence to actually use it effectively. So how can we then relate the study to higher education institutions? And we are called to actually promote responsible AI. And what is responsible AI? It refers to developing and using AI systems to optimize advantages for individuals, groups, institutions, and the broader society while mitigating potential adverse impacts. It is a shared responsibility. We must all take responsibility for this. We have to then promote, guide, and support the responsible use of AI through training, through ensuring guidelines that our researchers can use to optimize their own decision-making when they actually use these AI systems. And we have to continuously, as an institution, then monitor the development and use of AI. I want to share with you a personal experience, and it relates to my use of ChatGPT on Sunday. I am busy to prepare for the World Conference on Research Integrity, and I am doing a comparison of the African Charter on Transformative Research Collaborations and the Cape Town Statement on Creating Fairness and Equity in Collaborations. The one has been developed with a clear Pan-African philosophical underpinning. The other one lacks that, even though Ubuntu was discussed in the wide consultations that took place, and I was very curious to see how AI could assist me. And I just used the free version, so I would basically take text, and then I would text from document A. I was using the concept document A and document B because I didn't want to import the or identify the two documents. And then I would say compare and analyze. And it was honestly amazing what came out. And what I realized, it was the first time that I was actually doing this. I am using AI and these generative AI tools on a daily basis to assist me. I ask questions, and then I utilize that information to do further research or to inform my further decision making in terms of what information I need to consult. But what was honestly amazing was that it provided me not only with a comparison, but also with an interpretation. And the interpretation was so well written that it is very tempting to actually use it as is. And I think that would be the pitfall. So I was in a situation where I am under time pressure to get the paper finalized because I have to submit the paper. Then I have access to some tool that would actually do a much better job than myself. I then tested that with Atlas.Di. I wanted to see what would be the difference between the use then of ChatGPT and Atlas.Di, because we know that Atlas.Di is a well-accepted tool to analyze qualitative data. And what I found, and I'm not an expert in Atlas.Di, but what I found was that Atlas.Di, or the way that I used it, and it might not be the most competent way in which I used it because I actually haven't used it before, but it clearly gave me codes but no interpretation. So it actually used the data set with the codes and without specific interpretations. And that was then when I started to doubt what will happen if I become over-reliant on the ChatGPT. I'm talking about the interpretations more. If I become over-reliant on the interpretations, because I know at conferences, sometimes researchers would, and this is an integrity conference, and researchers might even take the paper submitted and they might put it through certain checkers, and then it might come out that I'm actually dishonest in my research. And that compelled me to ask, but what would be a responsible way in which we can use AI? And I'm happy to say that I think I found it. And I may not have all the answers, but I think then Dr. Chano and Sydney will definitely expand our understanding and my understanding much more. But when I consulted the European Commission document, it's a 23 document, and it's actually, I found it in your statement, Dr. Nikki, and I'm done with the statement. I can now give it to you. It's one of my outstanding promises that we are actually working on a statement on AI in Unisa. And when I saw reference made to that document, the living guidelines on the responsible use of generative AI in research, I read the document and I was quite impressed. They say it's a living document because AI is continuously developing and emerging, but they identify exactly the same principles that we should strive for as scientists from the earliest time that science originated. Our research must be reliable. So when we choose any method, and that would entail also when we choose AI to do our research, any digital tool to use during research, and we know there are many digital tools. Harry spoke about we can use it to summarize. We can ask AI to assist us with literature reviews, but when we then choose those tools, we need to be able to justify the use of the tools, and we need to be able to ultimately produce research that will be verifiable. And we can thus ask ourselves two questions concerning reliability. Does the use of the AI create possible inequalities and discrimination? And does the use taint, or does it promote verifiability? So obviously, if I use ChatGPT, I've got and I don't consider how I should be transparent and honest in terms of how I used it, I would compromise also the reliability principle, because other researchers might not be able to reproduce the research that I am producing. So this then aligns to the honesty principle. We must be honest, and this is also stated in the Singapore statement, that honesty is one of the central principles when we develop, carry out, review, report, and communicate on research transparently, fairly, and then also impartially. And this principle then includes, as I said, disclosing. So you have to disclose, and Sydney will show us examples. He said he will show us examples of how we can disclose. Then respect, it's again, you will see it is a principle that we are very well known with in the research fraternity. We must have respect for our colleagues, participants, society, cultural heritage, and the environment. So we should ask ourselves, when we use these tools then, what are the limitations of the technology? Its environmental impact, I've learned that it has a very huge environmental impact, and its societal effects. And if we do not know, we need to then make sure that we grow our competence actually to be able to answer these questions. And then finally, remember that we are accountable. We can never blame any oversight on an AI tool that we have used. We need to make very sure that when we engage in any research activity, that we can remain accountable. But the document then provides very good guidance for researchers, and I think this is what I found very helpful in my struggle to determine how to use the amazing data that ChatGPT produced for me. So firstly, we have to remain then responsible for research output, and the guidance provided is that we should remember that we remain accountable. We have to maintain a critical approach to using the output and understand its limitations, and I mentioned that. And then we must remember, and we all know this, that AI cannot be an author or a co-author, and we should be very mindful that there could be errors in the information, but AI, I can see, is becoming, ChatGPT, the free version, is definitely becoming more competent, and if you are working in a field, you would be able to actually spot inaccuracies, but we should be mindful then not to use fabricated material. Further recommendations relate then to the transparent use of AI, and I think this for me was my biggest highlight. we have to identify. So my job would be in that paper to identify which AI tools have been used substantially in the research process. And I mean, these concepts are all open to interpretation. So what does substantially mean? But I can definitely argue, if I took 2 documents and I compare the documents word for word, I definitely used it substantively for the analysis and the comparative analysis of these 2 documents. Then I have to reference the tool, and that refers to, you should include the name, the version, the date, etc. when you reference it. And then I must be able to say, how did I use it, as I explained it now to you. And then they also indicate that we must remain mindful of the random nature of generative AI tools, and then we must make sure that we should provide other researchers with clarity how they can reproduce. So how can another researcher reproduce this comparative analysis to determine the validity and the reliability? And I didn't know on Sunday, but now I know. They actually say that we have to include the prompts to clearly identify how you have used this tool. Moving on, there's reference made to upholding privacy, confidentiality, and intellectual property rights. So we must make sure also then that when we use AI tools, as peer reviewers, we should not be tempted to take someone's unpublished work and put it in an AI tool to use it for our own purposes, for instance, for peer review. Apparently this has been done. I myself obviously have not do it and will not do it, because I mean it is not making common sense to take someone else's work and put it in an AI tool. So we must be mindful for that. We must display respect and collegiality the same way that we are displaying respect and collegiality when we are peer reviewers. We are not supposed to actually share it with another person. I know that ChatGPT it might seem human-like, but it is not a human. So exactly the same principle, be mindful not to share that information with AI tools. Also then, important to know what are the national and the international and the institutional regulations. And we have to then pay attention to plagiarism, and it can happen inadvertently, but it can also be done intentionally. And we need to always be very careful to handle personal information with great care. So, for instance, don't import any personal information in the AI tool. Make sure that you have a clear data management plan, because I think the next step for us would be at Unisa to provide guidance to our researchers on data management plans. We are not doing so well with that. We've got you know that if you apply for NRF funding, you need to have, or any other funding, you need to have a data management plan. But in ordinary situations, doing research, we don't expect a complete data management plan as part of the ethical clearance process. We have questions about data management in the application form. But I think we just need to reconsider the link then between data management. How do we share data with our colleagues maybe in other countries? Do we have transfer agreements with those colleagues? Is it safe to use Google Drive if we share big data sets? And these guidance should come from the university so that we actually know how to deal with these issues. And then the last recommendation is that we have to continuously learn how to use generative AI. We must embark on courses, capacity development. There are several online courses available. When you see Sydney in the next session, he is actually our AI champion in terms of all the courses that Sydney has been completed, and he's also utilizing AI as a topic for his further studies. So let us all embrace an approach where it always starts with the self, but we are part of an ecosystem, therefore we have to play the game within the rules of the ecosystem, and we need to display collegiality, we need to display respect. We need to make sure that when we use these tools, we are honest and transparent concerning the use. And then finally, in 2011, Sir Paul Nurse said, "Trust me, I'm a scientist," is not a good enough answer. And I would argue that if we utilize principles, and these principles will be emerging, this document, the 2023 document, is just one document providing guidance to us. There are many others that were developed since then, but I still believe it is a very good document for researchers. I think we can then actually say that trust me could be a good enough answer if we are responsible researchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. V. Dr. V, spared us 9 minutes. Do we have a Q&A at the end of the session, but if we have a Q&A now, Dr. V would take the questions. Do we have any questions for her?
There's a close alignment between research integrity and research ethics. But from an ethical perspective, there will be focus then on informed consent. It will be about how is the participants aware of how you will use AI concerning their data. And so we will need to reconsider our informed consent process. And you will see it aligns to the specific recommendation concerning privacy and confidentiality. And when we then, for instance, use a transcript and we use AI, did we de-identify that transcript? And are we sure that the AI tool we use is actually safe? How are we going to ensure that? So I think we will need to do more research in terms of the safety then of participant information. I hope this helps. I think that is the issue that we will have to address.
But one thing I've realized that this AI is to a larger extent about integrity. Because if you feel like copying and pasting as it is, you can do so. But if you feel like looking at it and maybe restructuring it, it's also up to you. Now, during your presentation, you made mention of the point that it's tempting to use it, but I'm not sure if you went in as far as addressing the question of how, therefore, to defeat that temptation. Because I think there is a critical issue if I'm rushing to submit something, maybe it's an article, then I may just put it there, ChatGPT, then copy and paste. But now, how do we defeat this temptation, as you mentioned, that it's kind of it's tempting to use it? Thank you.
And I basically then determine which resources can I consult additionally to make sense of this findings that I received, and I make sure that I am not going to cut, copy and paste, because I think that would be a very irresponsible thing to do, because the AI checker will, they will pick it up. There's a possibility that it will be picked up. Also, remember that we've got AI, but as researchers, we are now having a tool that can make our life easier. We have, or tools, not one, but we have this. But still, at the heart, we must remain responsible. And I think probably fear is preventing me to act unethically, or let me rather say to act as responsibly as possible with the knowledge that I have. And I think what is very important, on Sunday I may not have sufficient knowledge to actually allay my own fears. After I prepared for today, I now know that what I can do is I can actually disclose the use of the AI. I didn't realize that you even have to share the prompts. You should even share how you used it, the prompts that you have used it. So, I will have to disclose the use of this. And in that way, I wouldn't want to say I cut, copy, and pasted information. So I think personally how we should behave is to remember that we remain accountable ultimately for what we produce. The use of AI should help us. It shouldn't take us away from being honest, responsible researchers. I want my study to be reproducible. So if I'm not clear in terms of how I've used this AI, how will Tanya, for instance, reproduce this study? So I hope I'm making sense, that it actually starts from being honest, understand, and then when you have this concern, don't engage. Since Sunday, I engaged with so many people about the responsible use of AI, actually, to allay my own fears, and then I did some research myself.
Now, should we be skeptical of turn it in report afterwards?
I know, and I know that Dr. Chana will speak about that. Erika Flinsbach actually said that it can pick it up very accurately, and I'm not sure if she shares the same concerns that you are raising. I don't know if I share that concerns. I'm not an expert in terms of the turn it in, but I would believe that it might pick it up, and I know that there can be false positives. I know that. But if there are false positives, you will be able to justify. I hope you will be able to justify. It will generate a Turn-It-In report, and just as you are doing now, you will have your research and you will have the Turn-It-In report, and you will scrutinize that if you have that opportunity, and I believe that you will be able to then justify false positives.
Thank you. Can we take one final question from Prof because of time? And then we can take your questions in the last session. It's for 30 minutes, I think.
We can allow 2 minutes. I will be short in my answer.
I'll start with you. You share really very important information. But just like the question Professor Dewey asked up there, your response borders on appeal to our senses of innocence and integrity. The Bible appeals. How many people
don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm just holding
So,
on.
I think, and I'm glad that I'm sitting next to Minister Godongwan here, because we need to think about more than just one field. And let me explain why. 3 weeks ago, one of the major publishing houses, Wiley, shut down 19 journals. It retracted over 11,000. You know the story, but for the papers of others here, it retracted over 11,000 manuscripts because they were engineered through AI. And we're not even talking about ChatGPT, a whole facet of AI. What that does, what Wiley basically was saying, is that as custodians of scholarship, we need to really put in place robust mechanisms to combat falsification of data. Now, many people don't realize that the Wiley scandal affects mostly papers in physics and maths. These are papers that play a great deal in innovation. Now, if our own scientific innovation endeavors are subject to scientific manipulation, 11,000 papers, colleagues, is huge. These are papers that are masquerading as papers that in the era of AI, they are obsolete. People are using AI tools in such a manner that they are able to conceal. But Wiley had people from the Silicon Valley who helped them. So we need to be in the innovative stage where we should say, here, I think I'd like to see a scenario where we have policies, we have steal. No, you can't steal. You'll be clapped. We have to have systems and policies in place to basically impose heavy sanctions.
One more question and then we will move on.
Yeah, I appreciate the ending of your presentation on the skeptical stance of AI's output. And, but where it seems to be having confusion is at a point in your presentation, you talked about not seeing AI as an author, fine. And at the other time, you were talking about the distinction between research integrity and research ethics and the need for us to make a claim of how it was used. So now, if I'm not, and I've learned earlier elsewhere that it's possible for you when you responsibly make use of AI in the referencing, you could, make claims that this was what I used, this was how I used it. But now, I seems not to be getting that in your presentation. You seem to say we can use AI at the same time we cannot present it as an author or,
of using AI. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. V. I'll be now handing over to Michelle Magagane to introduce our next facilitator, Mr. Sidney Engelberg. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you, Ms. Mudaka. Good morning, colleagues. Please allow me to introduce the esteemed and established facilitator, Mr. Sidney Engelbrecht. Mr. Sidney is currently appointed as Senior Research Compliance Specialist at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Mr. Sidney has been working in research administration and management for more than a decade, with a specific focus on research ethics and integrity and compliance. He is a seasoned research ethics administrator in human research, animal research and biosafety, and research integrity. Throughout his career, he offered research training and advice on those subjects at various universities and research ethics committees in the Southern African Developing Community. He was the principal investigator for a project gauging the need for research ethics training in South African Developing Community countries. In 2019, he obtained professional recognition as a research management professional accredited by the International Professional Recognition Council. Mr. Sidney is the recipient of the award for distinguished contribution to the research management profession from the South African Department of Science and Innovation in South African Research Innovation Management Association. In 2020, he co-led the drafting of research ethics guidelines and toolkits for access and benefit sharing in the context of the Nagoya Protocol for SADC. He authored 2 chapters in the student notebook on jurisprudence for laboratory animal technologists. He is a member of the core group of the European Research Integrity Officers Network and UCREO Advisory Community. Mr. Sidney obtained qualifications in law, philosophy from Stellenbosch University, South Africa. Thank you, Mr. Sidney. Over to you.
Confirmation. Okay. Good morning, colleagues. The title of my talk, The Use of AI, and I will specifically focus on generative AI in higher education, asking about the opportunities or challenges that come with the implementation or the acceptance of AI in higher education. So just some disclaimer before I go into further detail, just to say that this is a complex topic. I think we all appreciate the fact that talking about the generative AI and LLMs in the context of higher education, it is complex. And ever since the dawn of ChatGPT in November of 2022, we haven't had much time to focus on it. And so I want to put it out there that I don't have all the answers, but let's approach this session with a spirit of inquiry. And with that said, what can we expect? Just to give you a quick introduction on the use of AI in scholarly work, then look at some quick examples of the use of AI in research, the regulations and guidelines as we have it today, looking at AI in our context, and that is the higher education landscape, and then also look at AI in the publishing landscape. We've heard the earlier question and the comment on what Wiley has been doing, and then share with you some reflection based on what has been happening over the last couple of years in the context of AI. So when we talk about AI, in particular, when I talk about AI this morning, what do I mean by AI? So AI, or then artificial intelligence, here I refer to a computer system, a computer system using patterns built on big data, and those patterns that then make predictions or recommendations, as Rita indicated, the use of ChatGPT, how it interprets data, and then give us a document that we could use to evaluate that particular outcome. So when I say AI in higher education these days, we are often talking about generative AI, and that is the context of today. And this is a system that generates text, images, video based on a user request, as Rita indicated, having prompts available, that is the user request. So with that said, I've used the system ChatGPT, and I ask the question, does artificial intelligence introduce a challenge to the ethics and science? And ChatGPT, as it would, responded and said that AI represents various ethical and scientific challenges. Some of it Rita already touched on, the fairness aspect, accountability. Dr. Nikki will talk in more detail about accountability, transparency. When we think of research integrity, it's important for transparency, and the responsible use of technology. So with that said, I will touch on some of these aspects. As I've indicated, Rita also touched on it in her talk. And then our next speaker will then talk about accountability. So as way of introduction, artificial intelligence is certainly not a new wave of technology. It's been with us for quite some time, but it is much more like a tsunami. And in our context, higher education, I think we will appreciate the sometimes difficult times that we live in higher education, and we have seen the disruptive times that we've had with COVID, with fees must fall, with roads must fall. And so AI may also be one of those causes of disruption, but it threatens to flood if we are not mindful. And so I want to emphasize the word mindful, that we need to be mindful as we engage with artificial intelligence in higher education. But talking about the waves of AI, just to look historically at the waves, we've seen the first wave, and there was a second wave in the early 2000s. And with generative AI since November 2022, we may ask the question, have we reached a new AI winter? In other words, are we facing a third wave of AI, and this particular time with a focus of generative AI? As I've indicated, generative AI, in particular ChatGPT, version 3.5 and further, has been with us since November 2022. So it's quite early days, and we will later on see what the immediate response of some universities were in accepting or banning or alienating or embracing the use of AI within their institutions. But there are various perspectives or views or opinions when we think of AI. My colleague, who is the director of our AI initiative, he says that the rise of artificial intelligence is inevitable, but should not be feared. And so there are some people who say that technology is going to disrupt the future of work, and perhaps it has. perhaps it has not. And so content creation can be a lengthy process or not. The choice is yours. And Rita earlier alluded to the fact that using ChatGPT can save you time. It saves you time when doing a literature review. And so it's important that we use it being mindful of the limitations that it may have. So AI as a tool, the choice about how it gets deployed is ours. Some people are completely against the use of AI, and others may have the perception that it can or cannot replace teachers. These are just some views that are out there, and I'm sure that in your own wisdom, you may have your own view of the use of AI in the context of higher education. Let's take a closer look at the use of AI in research. We have seen in image creation, AI can be used in music. There we can see how virtual reality helps, in this particular case, a master's student in playing piano. We have also seen the use of AI with navigating systems and satellite systems, and that is nothing new. We have also seen how AI have been used in producing academic papers good enough for journals. And I will later on talk about the publication landscape and how AI have been detected in the use of journal publications. In the healthcare system and medical research, AI has been useful there, and we have seen how AI can also help with homework. So there are a number of publications over the last year that focuses on the use of AI, for example, in scholarly publications, in medical education, in literature review, and in other aspects of academia. But let's look at and take a quick look at what the regulations and guidelines are telling us. Over the last year, in particular last year 2023, and this year has been quite busy on the legal front, and we have seen that AI guidelines or legislation are becoming more important to navigate the uncertain times. We have seen in Ghana, for example, the emphasis on using AI in the agriculture and the medical field. In Japan, they now talking about having AI regulations in place since the G7 last year. In Europe, we have seen them becoming the first country with actual AI legislation in place. The same with the White House having, in October last year, promulgated their executive order on the use of AI. In my field, or in my space here in the UAE, we also having, in particular in Saudi, we have the AI authority that have published their guidelines last year, and the same in the UAE for Dubai and Abu Dhabi. In China, there are guidelines, and China is not just focused on AI regulations, but they're also now focusing on scientific guidelines for the use of AI, and I will touch on that in my following slides. Canada is also coming out with a code, a particular code for the practice of generative AI. And then lastly but not least, in Australia, they now also in November last year are starting to promulgating AI regulations. And then this year we have seen the United Nations promulgating or have published this guideline, a 30-year strategy for our AI use in the AI in Africa. And this particular guideline document, it's open for communications and it's open for comment. It is open for input, and you are welcome to submit your comments on this particular guideline document that closes on the 31st of May. So let's take a closer look at what's happening in Canada, in particular in the context of higher education, because that is what we're talking about today, and asking the question how generative AI is being received in higher education. A public survey that was done with 126 higher education universities in Canada, and many of the responses would resonate with us, saying that AI use isn't standardized and being used on an individual basis. When Rita asked the question earlier this morning, how many have used the AI tools earlier this week or through the course of this week, the response was quite low. So it's more on an individual basis. Professors or faculty and admin feeling that some of the responses is that they're quite optimistic, but they're also concerned about the use of AI in higher education. And the others feel that perhaps it is time to have policies available and guidelines, practical guidelines on the use of AI at the institutions. And you would see that 24% of the respondents didn't know whether their institution had established guidelines on the use of AI in higher education, either in education itself or for research purposes. So this is just a snapshot on the outcomes of this particular survey. Over the last couple of years, there's been a number of guidelines that talk to that have established principles on the use of AI in various sectors, including higher education and research. Just to highlight there for you, end of last year, with the EU being the first continent to have adopted the AI regulations, and earlier this year we have seen the implementation of the ISO guidelines for responsible and safe use of AI in various sectors around the globe. So I'm not going to talk about ethical considerations, but just to highlight some of the guidelines, in particular the UNESCO guidelines. And asking the question, so who loves AI? I think we all love AI. It's an easy tool to use. It's not time consuming. It helps us with literature review and so on. But when it comes to who is willing to deal with the ethical guidelines for AI, nobody puts up their hand. But all is not lost. As I've indicated, Unisa has a host of AI guidelines. What I highlight here for you are 5 guidelines within the context of higher education, within the context of information, computer and technology, within the context of research. And these are guidelines. What I highlight in particular are 5 guidelines within the context of higher education, within the context of information, computer and technology, within the context of research. These are guidelines that we can draw on, in particular in the absence of institutional policies, where some universities may not have policies available to guide students and researchers and academics on the use or responsible use of AI in research. And these 10 principles I want to highlight for you, that is in the 2021 guidelines from UNESCO, and these are recommendations. They are not law, they are recommendations for the use of artificial intelligence, the ethical use of artificial intelligence. So I just want to highlight this as well, because I want to focus on other aspects of the use of AI in academia. As I've indicated, late last year in December, we have seen the ISO publishing the 42001 standard, the international standard, safety standards for the responsible use of AI. And here they promote the ethical issues, transparency, and education or learning in terms of AI being deployed in various sectors. So experts, end of last year, experts indicated that 2024 will be a pivotal year for AI regulations. And indeed, we have seen yesterday the breaking news where the European Council finally not just adopted, but approved the AI Act in Europe. And so this is now the law going forward for the European Council. So let's then step off the guidelines and the regulations and focus on something that's more closer to home for us, and that is AI in the higher education landscape. Now, we have seen in 1998, in April of 1998, teachers took to the streets in protest against the use of calculators. And similarly, we have seen last year our universities with the immediate reaction, with a knee-jerk reaction or snap judgment, decided to ban the use of ChatGPT at the institutions. But important to note, this particular publication dating back to 2019, highlighting that the use of calculators did not replace mathematicians, it did not replace teachers, and AI won't replace humans. So we have seen March last year, just over a year ago, when ChatGPT was announced in November 2022, our universities, and I highlight those universities, Oxford and Cambridge, which form part of the Russell Group universities, have come out to ban the use of ChatGPT because they had fears of plagiarism. And this was their immediate reaction as a university, how they navigated the disruptive time that was caused by AI tools in education. And you would see a few months later, in the same year, in October last year, they have then published their guidelines or the principles on the use of generative AI tools in education. In the next slide, I will share with you what those 5 principles are. Essentially, it says that the universities, those 25 universities that form part of the Russell Group, would support students and staff to become AI literate. And this is what Rita indicated, that we need to educate our research community, our university community. Staff should be equipped to support students on the use of generative AI effectively and appropriately in the learning experience. Universities will adopt teaching and assessment to incorporate the ethical use of generative AI and support equal access. Equality is important. Universities will ensure the academic rigor and integrity will be upheld, and then universities will work collaboratively to share best practices, because this is an evolving, so it's ongoing as the technology and its application in education evolves. And I think these are fair principles. So from a principle-based approach, these universities have incorporated ethical and responsible use guidelines for incorporating, for embracing AI in their institutions. As I've indicated, China has now published in December last year, just a few months ago, 6 months ago, they have published these new guidelines for scientists. And this is based on the use of generative AI or the use of AI in publications, where it says that the use should be clearly labeled and explained. As Rita indicated, when you use prompts, it must be explained in the publication and referencing the content that is identified as AI generated by other authors. So clear disclosure of the use of generative AI is required. And it also says that generative AI cannot be a co-author. And I will later on go and show you where generative AI was actually used as a co-author. And that paper later on got corrected. And then if in the use of generative AI in the peer review activities, prior consent from the organizers, in other words, the journal or the publishers, is required if you as a peer reviewer would use it in that particular process. So in our field of higher education, and this goes back to July 2022, where there was this global summit on higher education, what a part of the report says the digital technologies simultaneously connect, which is a good thing, but also divide certain universities. And this requires and build new capabilities that structure the divergent opportunities and outcomes for different nations, social classes, and communities. We need to be mindful that the access to these AI tools can further cause division and it can further cause inequalities. And so this report also says at the Global Summit on Higher Education that it is critical for higher education, the impact of the digital revolution, and that the fourth industrial revolution is accelerating the disruption of work and requires universities to retool themselves to cater for the growing demand for lifelong learning and the needs for reskilling and upskilling while retaining their role as the primary sites for knowledge production. Knowledge production, I want to highlight. So when we think of generative AI, it could be in two contexts. For example, for research papers for journals, or the use thereof in academic writing for student assignments and so on. And most universities are now turning to AI detection as though it is some sort of magic aid that will help to navigate the use of AI. And we ask the question, will AI detectors help? So will they be useful? Let's take a look. So last year, and please take a note of this date, 13th of February 2023, last year. I want to turn my focus to Turnitin. Turnitin announced that they have successfully developed an AI writing detector tool. And in their tests, they have identified 97% of ChatGPT authored writing with a very low 1 out of 100 false positive rate. They then further, the CEO of Turnitin says, however, this requires constant evolution, working closely with educators while training on available relevant data sets. And they acknowledge that this is evolving, so it requires constant evolution. But focus on the date of 13th of February 2023, where Turnitin then make this announcement. As you know, there are other detector tools, and whether it works at your particular institution, you would be able to know that. But then in July last year, there's this publication saying that the rush is on for reliable detecting AI writing. But let's take a closer look at what this paper is telling us. So Turnitin indicated that they have this particular tool and they have reviewed a number of papers, 65 million student papers for AI writing. And what did they find? They found that 2 million or 3.3 flagged that 80% or more AI written texts and 6 million or 10.3 were flagged as containing at least 20% AI written text. It also highlighted the fallibility and the whole idea of potential false positive. But the test found that only 6 of the 16 papers presented, this is a different test, were identified correctly, and the errors included 1 false positive, saying that it was not human written essay. So Turnitin then acknowledged that there is this fallibility for their AI detection. Then in November last year at the University of Kansas, the researchers have built their own AI detector system. They compared it using 6 data sets, and they've compared it to Zero GPT and to OpenAI's detector system. They used, as I've indicated, 6 data sets, 2 that are human written, that's on the left that you will find, 2 sets that is AI generated. It's generated text using titles from human generated articles, and then 2 sets that is AI generated using abstracts from the human generated text in the AI prompt. And what they found was that researchers at the University of Kansas found that they have now developed a AI detector tool that can clearly distinguish between human written text and computer-generated text, not just 80% or 90%, but 100% of the time. And the leading author or the corresponding author said that their focus were on accuracy, how accurate their tool was to detect whether the text was human written or computer written. And so their recommendations is for journals should take reasonable steps to ensure that their policies about AI writing are followed. And we think that it is fully feasible to stay ahead of the problem of detecting AI. And as we know, many journals and publishers have their own AI use policies. Also, last year, there were a number of publications asking the question, does AI detector tools work? And some of the experts, Melissa at MIT, said it's extremely unlikely that you would find a tool that can detect it 100% certainty. Tom at Times Higher Education said that AI detector tools aren't working. Hopefully, regulations would be the answer. OpenAI in September last year confirmed that AI writing detectors don't work. So in short, the answer is no, these tools do not work. But if you look at another tool that is being developed, and this is now tools that transform AI text to human text. While they have a free plan, which is quite limited, very limited, they also have a paid plan where you pay and it increases its services to ensure that the text that you submit, the AI-generated text, become human-like text. And so they humanize AI text by bypassing AI detection tools. And so as we can see, the tools are evolving at the speed of wind. So what are our roles as universities? University Alliance published this paper to say that when it comes to AI and university, it's a pressing issue. And the overwhelming rise of text generators raises the need for reflection and guidelines to ensure that the ethical use in academia setting. And so ChatGPT asking the question then, is it a disruptive tool or subversive collaboration? At my institution, and this is just an example, we have developed a guideline on publication ethics and authorship. We have a dedicated section on the use of artificial intelligence in the context of research. And here we follow the COPE statement that I will speak to in a bit. We also have a questionable research practices procedure that's saying that the non-disclosure of the use of AI in creating content could be investigated under the questionable research practices procedure. We have a joint statement, and I want to highlight and acknowledge that this joint statement was created by ChatGPT, where we communicated with our research community saying what the university's stance is on the use of AI in research. So talking about the use of AI in higher education, looking at two quotes from Jonathan Jansen, where he says perhaps people are asleep at higher education wheel, or that this is a misplaced overreaction about AI and how higher education is dealing with the issue of the use of AI in research and education. And this is a really insightful paper published by University World News, where there are inputs or views from Northwest University, University of Johannesburg, UCT, and Stellenbosch University, where some of these comments have been made in that particular paper. But just to highlight some of the comments from that particular paper, every new technology over, say, the past 100 years have come with perceived threats, and perhaps AI is a threat to academic integrity, but human ingenuity responded in ways that took the best out of the intervention and worked around its excesses in the process. And we've seen that with the scientific calculator. In the short term, in classroom assessment, and in the long term, detecting technologies that can require students to produce their own work. Putting the emphasis on detecting technology, I'm not sure whether that is a sufficient resolution to this problem. And then the same will be true for this new bot. As new bots and new AI detector tools are being developed, we will continuously have the same problem, asking the question, is higher education asleep? Let's then talk about the publication landscape and what is happening in the publishing field. So again, I want to highlight the dates for you. The COPE, which is the Committee on Publication Ethics, since 1999, they have been the benchmark for promoting publication ethics. And so in February, 13th of February, 2023, I said the date is important, they came out with a public statement, what they call the COPE position statement, saying that AI tools cannot be listed as an author on a paper. And this is 13 February 2023. But let's take a look at what happened a month earlier. In January 2023, we saw the first paper in an Elsevier journal called Nurse Education in Practice, where they've not only used and disclosed the use of AI, but they've listed ChatGPT as an author and a corresponding author, as you would in a paper. And then in February the following month, we have seen the COPE, the position statement, saying that AI cannot be listed as a co-author of a paper. Why? Because it does not meet the requirements for authorship, because it cannot take responsibility. It's not a legal entity. And so it does not ban the use of AI. What it says is authors who use AI tools in writing of the manuscript, in the production of images or graphical elements of the paper, or in the collection or analysis of data, must be transparent in disclosing in the materials and method or similar section in the paper. Now, those of you that have published before would know that this is an important section in a paper, the materials and method. And so what COPE, or this position statement, is telling us that AI tools can be used as long as there is full disclosure to the extent in which the AI tool was used, because authors take full responsibility for the content. So there's the responsible and the accountability aspect for the content that is in the publication. So the following month, then, what happened in March was that the same paper that was published in January got a correction on 13th of March. The Elsevier then issued a correction regarding an earlier announcement about the particular paper that we now see there, where ChatGPT was listed as a co-author. And Elsevier subsequently published their publishing ethics guidelines. I want to zoom in on that, saying that where authors use generative AI and AI-assisted technologies in the writing of these technologies, it should be disclosed. And it can be used to improve readability, can be used to improve the language of the work, but essentially the authors are ultimately responsible and accountable for the contents of the work. So ChatGPT is fun, but it's not an author. And there may be the perception that tools such as ChatGPT threaten transparent science. Here are our ground rules for their use in science. I just want to share with you some examples where the use of ChatGPT did not work out well. In this particular example, you would see in the first line of the introduction, where the wording certainly here is a possible introduction for your topic, is an AI-generated statement. And the questions that we ask ourselves, any other parts of the paper, is that also generated by the AI tools? And how is it possible that through the peer review, that the editors and the peer reviewers did not notice this? How did the co-authors not notice this particular statement? Another example where in the summary, in the closing of the paper, where the texts are clear that the text was generated saying that I am an AI language model. And the criticism is, at some point, the conversation needs to turn to the ethics of the scholars, because it's not just sloppy work, it's not just cheating, they should be held accountable. And in this particular example, where the radiology case reports, the journal actually has a policy on the use of generative AI, saying that authors should not only use these technologies to improve readability and language, similar to what Cope is telling us, but that there should be a statement that appear with the work to what extent they have used the AI. And obviously, in this case, the published work did not refer to the use of AI. You may have noticed this Frontier paper where this animal study was published, where AI generated this fortunate rat with what they call the big crown jewels or genitalia that was published. And again, the questions that we ask is, how did this pass the peer review system? And I have blacked it out so that it may be sensitive to some viewers, and for that reason I have blurred the image. So in this case, the use of AI to generate a particular image was not disclosed, but yet it passed the peer review system. And this particular paper then got retracted a few months ago in February, again 13th of February. This paper got retracted by Frontier for not disclosing AI as part of the research. Another retraction just last month, April, just last month, where this particular paper got retracted, and on the front page of this paper in class 1, you would find the concerns that were raised by the journal. And I want to highlight some of the concerns, why they've decided to retract the paper. And the concerns are because of the undisclosed use of AI tool to generate text, in this particular text, not image. And also the authors, the co-authors, were unable to verify 18 of the 76 cited references. And when they were given the opportunity to respond to this, the authors then said that only AI tool was used in the manuscript to using Grammarly to improve the language. That is the justification or the explanation that the co-authors gave to the journal. But then when they provided the replacement references, several of those replacements did not appear to support the corresponding statements in the article. Again, the issue of taking responsibility and being held accountable. So in this particular Retraction Watch paper, they have listed 77 papers in March alone, where the full paper that passed peer review, but it was generated by ChatGPT or an AI technology. Last month, that number increased to 92. And just to share with you the earlier paper of March, this were the 77 articles, you would see on top the country with the most AI-generated papers is India, followed by the US with less than half of India's number of publications using ChatGPT. So some reflections in closing then. I like this quote by Andrea, where he says that the ongoing dialogue around AI and research integrity is complex. That's what I said from the onset of this presentation. But by fostering a culture of openness, transparency, and the ethical use of AI, we can ensure that AI propels research forward without compromising its very foundations. The same person as the question whether AI is our friend or is it our foe, is it something good to use or not to use, is it our research partner or a research predator, and so there are obvious benefits to having AI as a research partner. Rita touched on that. Specifically, it helps us with content generation, it saves time, but it can also be our enemy, it can also be a predator in terms of widening the gap of inequalities. It leads to manipulation of data, plagiarized information, fabrication of data, and so on. So one needs to be mindful when employing these AI tools in our writing processes. And then this quote by the Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, saying that AI systems are becoming, it's not becoming, it is part of our daily lives, but the key is to ensure that these machines are aligned with human intentions and values, human intentions and values. So while we use these tools, one need to have good intentions, promoting research integrity and implying the ethical values to ensure that we remain accountable for the work that we produce. So we have seen a number of LLMs and we have seen a number of AI tools being developed. Some are free, some are behind paywalls, unfortunately. And so in 2024, and we are now in May, in 2024, there are more than 100,000 AI tools that we can use for image generation, for text, and so on. And one needs to ask ourselves, where is this going to end? But as these tools evolve, a quote by Marshall McLuhan, where he says, we shape our tools, thereafter our tools shape us. And this is a quote that dates back to 1968 in Saturday Reviews, where Marshall McLuhan, who was a technologist, published a paper on the developments of AI technologies back then, and where he says, we shape our tools, thereafter our tools shape us. And so as we shape these tools, one needs to engage with the tools. We need to educate ourselves on these tools in terms of the nature of the tools, the limitations that come with the tools, and its potential implications. I want to end off by saying we have the benefit of experience. So let the lessons of the past be learned and never be repeated. We have seen in these examples that I've shared with you the use of AI or the unethical, irresponsible use of AI. Let's not repeat those mistakes, but let it be lessons from the past. Just to share with you some of the references and an acknowledgement from my side, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take a 10 minutes break and then questions, we'll take them at the end with Dr. Nikki, just to respect time of the colleagues. So thank you, Mr. Sydney. We'll take questions at the end. We're going to take a 10-minute break for tea and coffee and then come back and then hand over to Ms. Tato, who will introduce Prof. Nikki and then have the last presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A. Thank you. Colleagues, it's 11:10. I'll be handing over to Ms. Tato Masinga to introduce our next facilitator, Dr. Nikki Chano. Thank you. Over to you, Mrs. Masinga.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm here to introduce our last presenter. Is it our last presenter? Yes, Dr. Nikki Jano. Dr. Nikki Jano is currently seconded to the office of the VP. He is substantively appointed as a CLD specialist in the Directorate of Curriculum Development and Transformation. Before this appointment, he was a senior lecturer in the Department of Business Management at SIMS. He was also seconded to the Deanery Office. He was under the Office of Tuition and Student Support as a technology-enhanced teaching and learning coordinator between 2018 to 2022. During this time, he was also responsible for supporting academics in identifying solutions and using tools for technology-enhanced teaching. He was also responsible for coordinating the academics training in the use of teaching tools whilst facilitating appropriate measures for change management in the college regarding technology-enhanced teaching and learning. Dr. Jano has also been recognized for his excellent work, winning awards like Best Employee of the Year in 2011, the Chancellor's Award for Best Overall Performance in 2012, and the SIMS Excellence Award for Outstanding Performance in 2021. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. T.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction. Good morning, colleagues. I'm recovering from flu, but I hope you can hear me. And I also read on the chat that colleagues who joined visually, they were struggling to hear us. In fact, they were saying we were talking very soft. That is why I asked for the microphone so as to amplify the voice. Colleagues, I think if you are to continue from Sydney's second last slide regarding the AI, and he did indicate that AI is with us, and I will add, and I think you might have heard it before, to say AI is here to stay. And it's for us then to say, how do we navigate those I wouldn't say uncharted territory, so to say, because we are already there. We are witnessing the challenges insofar as AI, from teaching and learning, from research, even from the angle of engaged scholarship. So it's a matter of us saying, how do we better get out of those challenges? But I'm using the word getting out very carefully because it is a dynamic process. It is evolving, so we're not going to get out anytime soon, but it's then to say, how do we coexist? And when Dr. Fisake, you asked that I look at accountability and governance, I read a number of frameworks, policy, guidelines, and I realized that we are missing an element, especially in the spirit of co-creation, coexistence, and that is why I added the transhumanism aspect there as part of what I'm going to talk about, but also to say we need this kind of dialogues because they are shaping the way we think about our research integrity practices and even ethical practices. And I was reflecting last week, we were in the same hall on another event, and it was a heated debate in terms of how people perceive the use of AI, and it started earlier after your presentation, because there are those who are for it and there are those who are against it. And if you hear those who are for it, they are saying AI will not have existed and be where it is without we human beings. But then those who are against it, and I think, judging from comments from other colleagues, it's a matter of saying, are we doing justice to our skills development in terms of what we are teaching? If someone like Prof. Dube, you indicated to say, if you are pressed for time, within few minutes you can just get an article or a book chapter out. But if we think in terms of the intelligentsia that we are building on, are we really doing justice? And I think maybe it's the question that we can unpack on the other day. If you also think of, and there is already a literature looking at over-reliance on these various tools, And you asked Dr. Fisaki when you started to say how many of us have used one of these tools. It just shows how it becomes part of our daily bread, as Sydney indicated. But then it's a matter of saying, how do we strike a balance between what the core or traditional teachers will protect? If you think of your Bloom's taxonomy, last week I talked of there is a movement towards digital blooms now. In terms of those critical thinking skills or high order thinking skills that we ought to be teaching, are we really doing justice to those? How do we balance this? And I think these are part of those discourse that we need, so that whatever the views, inputs from a community in the university form part of the policies. Because if we, wherever we are, come up with policies that do not talk to what is happening on the ground, it's going to be a difficult situation. But I just wanted to sort of bring this background insofar as where I came when I was thinking about this topic, to say, how do we best target it in such a way that it will sort of create this conversation going forward. But also the other element that brings about this discussion is more on academic integrity. And we are more like guardians, so to say, to save this academic integrity. And I think there was a seminar that I attended sometimes 2 weeks, and one of the presenters indicated to say, in the era of blockchain technology and micro-credentials, MOOCs, the OERs, soon the relevance of universities will be something of the past. And if you check, and he unpacked it to say, if you look at prestigious universities that we want to go to, your MITs, your Harvard, it is more now on the name that is on that paper that we want to buy, whether it is a 3-year degree, a 4-year degree, or a PhD. And I can come and say, I got my PhD from Harvard, and I think we're doing the same here to, where did you get your PhD, and those kind of things. But prevalence of these tools and your MOOCs, as I mentioned, your OERs, micro-credentials, have we thought about the relevance of the universities post that era? Because now, if we were to get especially from our regulatory point of view perspective, if we were to get basically micro-credentials and blockchain right, students are now looking for skills rather than a pure qualification in the true sense of the words. And as we engage in these other dialogues on the PQM matters, we then ask to say, if you look at a normal 3-year B degree, is it still relevant to have it for it to be constituted of 30 modules? In the world of work, do we need other modules? And it is something that we can still debate on an ongoing basis. But then let's look in terms of the generation that we have. They want quicker things, so to say, and you will see those that are teaching in your assessments. I will say they want shortcuts just to get straight to the answer. But if you are trained as a teacher, you want to follow that pedagogical process of learning up until someone acquires a skill. And then they say you are pedantic if you are a lecturer. And those are the discourse that we need to engage as we are building our PQM colleagues. So I thought, while we are talking about AI, let's broaden it up. And I started today with one of the elements there, Dr. Fisaki, in terms of transhumanism. And as you read the BCG report and Responsible AI Institute recently indicated, and November 2023, as Sidney was saying, it was the first year anniversary of ChatGPT. And they indicate that AI is often referred to as a black box. And for those that watch movies, I think there were a number of movies about black box. And we all, if you are associated with black box, it's more of a prestige. But then, what is the second part in terms of the regulations, frameworks, and guidelines around it? And they say they are mystifying. And it is true. Because if you check here now as a country, as South Africa, we have got many universities and TVET colleges. Ideally, we should be having a position statement at the country level, which then guides to say, as a country, this is our position insofar as use of AI is concerned. It is not there. They are still working on some frameworks. And you then ask yourself to say, we are within one eco-space as universities and as creators of knowledge, but then VETs will have their own statements, CPUT will have their own statements, UP and so forth, but we are within the same. And you will have VETs that will then say, I'm just giving an example out loud here, we don't promote the use of AI, whereas another university does that. What do we say? Because we are creating the same knowledge or we are building the same knowledge. And those are some of the confusion part of it. Let's come back home at Unisa as well. Unisa is big, as you know, colleagues. But you will find one lecturer in the same department, one lecturer say, I'm for use of AI tools, but another lecturer say, no, I don't want my students to use the AI tools. I think, in a way, that practice is confirming what the BCG and Responsible AI Institute have said about the mystifying part of those regulations and how complex are they. But I think the other part of complexity is the speed with which these AI tools are evolving. And you might have seen from Sydney's slide, he indicated just by 2024, how many LLMs are we having? And as we are now, one is being released, one is being developed, the code is being changed accordingly. So they are there. And at what pace are we then coming up with these regulations? That's another food for thought, so to say. So the multitude of mechanisms can be challenging to comprehend because of various laws and jurisdictions and scope, which is true. And I just gave an example. If you think of country-by-country comparison, Italy at some point had banned ChatGPT for about 9 months or so, and then later they reconsidered that. Of course, they had reasons. If you think of the privacy concern that you raised, the risk that you raised, Dr. Fisari. So in many instances, it is unclear how different pieces of those legislation or legislative framework fit together. And it becomes a challenge if we are unable to comprehend that. So now, why did I bring the element of transhumanism, as I say, is more aligned to co-creation, coexistence? And if you look there, it then reads as follows. It is a theory that human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitation, especially by means of science and technology. It is an intermediary form between human and post-human, resembling a human in most respects, but who has powers and ability beyond those standard humans. And it goes further to say it is based on the idea that biological evolution will eventually be overtaken by advances in genetic, wearable, and implantable technologies. And we are witnessing those, where we are now having some medical devices implanted in us and so forth. We are having wearable devices in the form of smartwatches and so forth. And even the science of genes as well has also gone beyond that. And if you look at the last part, and I think that's the one that, resonated well, to see some of the examples of transhumanism include anti-aging and artificial intelligence. And I'm more focused on the last aspect. And Thomas Fuchs, in his transformation critique chapter titled Beyond Human, he then indicates, while biological humanity is slowly dying out, humans will ensure continued existence of their minds through computer simulation. And this view illustrates possibility of human and machine merging, collaborating, which is part of the co-creation, as I said. And if you then look at that view of Thomas, and recently what the statement on AI risk by Center for Artificial Intelligence Safety, there were about 350, and it might have increased. Senior professors, experts in the field that pledged their signatures, so to say, towards having safe AI. Because there were lights on the wall already in terms of the possible risks, and if they are not managed, what will be the impact? And the call is still ongoing. And that statement was preceded by an open letter cautioning against risks of AI. And Rose in 2023 reported that those who signed that open letter, amongst others, were some of the leading CEOs from OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, to mention the few. So now, if the very same people who are leading the organizations that are producing these tools are concerned about safety around AI, what about us on the other side, who are then the end users? So you can read further. I'm still going to share the slides in terms of what the statement entails and so forth. But now taking it back to transhumanism and the positions or even the values around it, is more about creation of freedom. And I think we talked about it earlier to say, how do I then create a balance? I want to be creative in the use of AI tools to have a write-up of a chapter or an article through the prompts. I'm the one prompting the AI tool. So, and I think in the very first presentation, we also talked about ownership, the issues around ownership. Who then own that content if it is generated from whatever, ChatGPT, POE, Perplexity, and so forth. And those are some of the salient points that needs to be discussed further for us to then agree as an institution, as an organization, to say, in terms of our view, who's the owner? Sydney reflected earlier on the authorship as well, to say who will be the author. And the debate can go on and on and on. The other element or the value is more on individualism, to say we shouldn't be compromising on individualism as far as this co-creation is concerned. And the other aspect is more on libertarism, which aligns more with the freedom aspect of it. And for those that are following, the nomenclatures of research, is the element of pragmatism that we also ought to be promoting as far as part of transhumanism and physicalism. So those are four mentioned values and positions of transhumanism. And one is then thinking to say, how do we bring these elements into our governance space as far as policy creation is concerned? How do we make sure that we promote them in the spirit of trying to create a balance? Balance in the sense that, on the other hand, we still want to promote creativity. But on the other hand, we also want to make sure that there is no misuse or irresponsible use of these AI tools. How do we promote that? And I think, based on the previous discussion, there is no one size all kind of a solution to this kind of problems, but we need number of interventions that can assist us. So if you look in terms of the AI proliferation, and we talked about it, the key questions that I usually ask when I do presentation is those questions. And there has been an ongoing debate as far as the increase in AI tools or prevalence of AI tools. And the debate is then to say AI will eventually replace human beings. That's what they are already asking. There is a literature around that, how they indicate how various industries are going to be affected by that. But one is then thinking to say, if indeed, as per the last question, to say, will AI eventually replace human beings? If we bring the element of ethics to say, is it right? Is it, and I think I touch on it in the next slide. But those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Who will then outsmart who between AI and human beings? Because it is now sort of a competitive nature. But then if you look further, and the argument that I mentioned to say that the colleague was so adamant to say, without AI, without human beings, AI is almost non-existent because it was built by the very same human beings. It's just that it has got capabilities of performing much more better, and this aligns to the very first question. Now, if you think of the moral standards, and I will just touch on it, and this is now indicated in that box, from the ethical point of view as well. If we are introducing AI, if you think of retail industry, we are introducing those automations, but then people are going to lose jobs. How do we create that balance that we always talk about? And we can even take that back here. We, with the advent of AI tools, the LLMs, the generative AIs, we might not really need instructional designers, because now the tools are able to give you a course outline or syllabus outline, and it is able also to match the assessment criteria and specific outcomes. But then we then say we don't need the instructional designers, or we have to rethink in terms of their roles. But then that balancing act is going to be sort of a dicey situation. And just on Monday, you will have heard that our quarter labor force statistics are not looking good. And this came from BBC article. So now taking forward the issue of legality and ethics, we then ask again to say, if we want to create that balance, are we going to be able to achieve a situation where these AI systems and tools are going to be humane, they can be used for good of humanity, or even it can be legal? And in other countries, they are legalizing. In other countries, they say, no, we don't want the use of this. Other universities, they are doing the same. And I think this is also at the heart of saying, how do we come with better guidelines? And I'm using the word better guidelines because then there will not be perfect guidelines. So, and these are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. The previous presentation was showing how we are now able to humanize AI text. And if you think deeply about it, it sounds like it's going to be a difficult exercise, because we talked about turning in the issues of false positives. And the whole idea is that on the false positives, those detection software, they are saying to you exactly to say, this text sounds like it is AI generated, but not because now the mechanics behind is the study of patterns and the linguistics around the order of the words and so forth. But then if the very same AI tools are purported to be failing in terms of executing that particular function, are we going to get our policy and guidelines right? Are we not going to be perpetuating injustice? And last week when we were presenting, I forgot, we are doing many presentations, but the RIASA webinar, I gave an example and an account of a close colleague who indicated that the student took him to task because the assignment was flagged that it was AI generated, and the student had to prove, because then student had notes when she was compiling that. And that's when now the eyebrows were raised against the over-reliance on AI detection software. And that's where I even, in my own reflection, to say, one size fits all is going to be a problem, because if we're going to rely on just the AI detection softwares as a way, to catch students, it's going to be problematic. But also, Dr. Fisaki, in response to Prof. Dube earlier, when he was asking to say, here are my temptations, how do I strike a balance between doing what is right? And for those that have got good taste in music, Clarence Carter once said, I got caught. Because then there was issue of temptation, and he knew that what he was about to do wasn't right, so to say. But I guess in his case, the temptation got better of him. But then the same example on what you raised, it was a critical point that you raised to say, how do I, as an individual, strike that balance? I know what I'm doing I'm not supposed to be doing, but I'm also, from Dr. Bupape's office, they want to report about, in fact, this morning in Senate, they were reporting about how we have improved M&D graduations. So on the other side, there are targets that we need to achieve or reach. On the other side, we need to say, I need to do what is right. So how do you also strike that balance, a delicate balance for that matter? And it's difficult. So that is why I was saying, then the one-size-fits-all will not work, because if we then come up with policies, we need to reinforce those policies with continuous training and development, and I think I've got it on the slides. That is one aspect. But also, do we have ethics-related workshops, courses, MOOCs, so that then we create awareness to staff, whether compulsory or otherwise? We can even discuss the issue of compulsory at a later stage. Maybe if it is compulsory, then it shows the dire situation of our behavior as a university. And that is another aspect. But there is also a responsibility from an individual themselves, to say, what is my responsibility? Yes, there is university's responsibility. There is also, in case of your office, your office responsibility, but what is it my responsibility? But also, and I don't want to digress, to say, are we looking in terms of the situations that we create as managers, for example? Because sometimes we demand too much from the very same colleagues. You ought to teach on the other side, you ought to do community engagement on the other side, you still have to produce research for promotion. Pfizer, like, you understand what I'm talking about. You are in teaching and learning, but you still have to do research and so forth. And one of the colleagues earlier, I saw trying to complete the IPMS and say, oh, that comes that period again. Those are some of the challenges that we are facing, and it's for us to say, how do we create this balance? Now, let's reflect on the good, the bad, and the ugly side of AI. And this idea came from that movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for those that will have watched it. But I'm sort of viewing it from the lens of, and I started with this when I quoted statement from Responsible AI Institute in terms of how the environment is so complex. And this is where I say, we have got sense of complexity on the other hand, but we also have sense of moral ambiguity on the other. And if we were to argue for the good side of AI is the greenish part, in terms of the advancements that we have done in health, in terms of being able to detect diseases like cancer and cataract and so forth. That's the good side. If you think of user experience personalization, when you are driving and you are using your Siri, and then it already stores your behavior, and over time then it tells you that, oh, it's now time to go to school, and those kind of things. It's part of personalization. What we read is part of information feeds, and whatever the topic that you read, you will tend to get similar kind of those stories popping up on your timeline. It's part of personalization. Efficiency and automation in the automotive industry, in the retail industry, is the scientific discoveries that we see. Those are the good side. And for those that are within those specialist areas, they will say, thank God we are now able to work better. If you ask medical doctors during COVID how the situation was strenuous, and if we were to think how some of these AI tools were used to even predict the increase or the surge in infection in other areas. And some of us, our medical aides, will be sending us messages to say, we realize that you were in a vulnerable area, please take cautions and so forth, because then they are using your GPS location and so forth. Those are the good side of things. But then if you look on the bad side, and then they're saying the slides are not correlating with what is on YouTube, colleagues, the multimedia. Now, if you look on the bad side, is the issues on the purple. I'm colorblind, but I take it's purple, the bottom right. The bias and discrimination that we read about, and how it is even perpetuating injustice in some areas. The job displacement, which I say is the issue of moral ambiguity. The privacy concerns and ethical dilemmas, which you, Dr. Visach and Sydney, touched on. But then on the ugly side is the malicious use, the existential risks, an unintended consequence. And I think it's the last part that also intrigued me very much to say, what are the unintended consequences of applying AI systems in our case? If you think of the Turnitin, is one example of it, because the detection software, we want to cap this number of high disciplinary cases that we read about. You might have seen the media statement that university issued sometimes 2 weeks ago. That we have about 1.5 students on the DC cases, and we say, okay, maybe that could be a solution. But we did not even realize or know, maybe at that point when we're procuring that system, to say it might be perpetuating the injustice, because those systems are reported to, to disadvantage the English second speaking people, so to say. So how do you balance those kind of issues? And I'm trying to move with time. Now, if you look at what UNESCO produced in 2019, to then indicate that AI has got potential to address some of the biggest challenges in education today, which is a good side, in terms of innovation in teaching and learning practices, acceleration of progress towards SDG goal, which is quality education. However, the rapid technological developments inevitably bring multiple risks and challenges, and which is why today we're having conversation like this, and we're trying to come up with those governance measures. So the first part is more on ethical AI, which is a branch of AI that is looking at promotion of ethics, and hence I said, I was saying, maybe let's think about introduction of ethics courses, either compulsory or otherwise, but it could be part of the selection process, I do not know. The second branch of this governance around AI is more on responsible AI. It's a field on its own. And then we have got the third one that looks at explainable AI, which you touched, Dr. Fisaki, but I'll link that when we are able to account for what we did, and we are able to replicate some of the results or some of the methodologies. And then the last one, which is slowly coming up and is promoted by UNESCO as well, it is the sustainable AI, especially now in the sense that if we were to link with that transhumanism that I talked about, to say, are we thinking beyond AI? And even in our practices, are our practices around AI sustainable? Or is it a matter of us trying to cap the short-term problems with the short-term solutions? And I want to zoom more into the explainable and responsible AI from policy and governance perspective, which is what we are trying to do at Unisa now as well. Because I think, colleagues, we can agree that beside the immense potential that AI tools are offering us, but there are still challenges that we want to address, as I talked about inequalities, bias, discrimination earlier. And the critical aspect here is protecting against the harm, misuse, abuse, both at an individual and societal level. And Leslie, in 2019, recommended 6 forms of potential harms that can result as a result of, that can be outcome of the misuse or abuse. And she talked about isolation and disintegration of social connection. And we talked about over-reliance earlier, and you will see if you have spent most of the time on this kind of work that we are doing, you tend to be isolated. The second part is on the invasion of privacy, and we have already talked about it. In fact, when my Microsoft Copilot was introduced, one of the first things that they wanted to address was the issue of privacy and how they are assuring us that our data is secure. And you'll see ChatGPT has also released a statement about privacy in terms of where the information is stored, what is used for. Most of us don't read those. We just go in on the other side, on the user interface and prompt. And you recall in one of the engagements, I then asked to say, if we are using these systems for the reports writing, aren't we exposing confidential information? Last week, I think you mentioned the read AI for minutes taking. Imagine if this is sort of a selection panel, you are appointing someone, there is that tool. Where is the issue of confidentiality there? The non-transparency and unexplainable or unjustifiable outcomes is another form that Leslie had identified. The denial of individual autonomy, recourse and rights. And you recall, one of the first values is around of transhumanism is around individualism. And now this AI are acting on the other side. The bias and discrimination, the last one, is more on unreliability, unsafe and poor quality outcomes that emerge as part of the harm. So, and it's for us now to think about this so that as when we come up with those policy and guidelines or frameworks, they should be aimed at managing the impact, because I don't think we can totally erase the risks that these AI tools are actually putting to us. So there are a number of types of AI governance, colleagues, I can assure you. This one comes from UNESCO, and they are sort of giving a guideline to say, how do we start with the process of creating a governance structure? We start with the core principle. What are the guiding principles and values? And you see, colleagues, the virtue-based ethics framework could be part of those. But what are, and OECD also came with their own, and you'll see in the next slides, I unpack more on this OECD principle. And there are also Asamoah principles and so forth, Montreal Declaration for Responsible Development of Artificial Intelligence and so forth. So, as a department, as a school, as a college, we could start with what are our own values or ethos that describe how we ought to behave around the use of AI. And then once we have agreed, as far as the values are concerned or principles are concerned, then we can come up with a framework. And a framework is just now taking the values and principles forward, but also coming up with operating structure and objectives, but most importantly, the definition. What do we mean by those? And then we can enact laws through and policies. It could be at the national level, but I'm sort of having this with an inward thinking of a university. Then, can you see now, it's interesting, Dr. Fisach and Tanya, voluntary guidelines are the fourth step. Once we have started with the principles or values, frameworks, and then we can come up with voluntary guidelines. And I think maybe we need to interrogate why voluntary guidelines. You get the point, because people are creating malpractices out of this. And some of the guiding guidelines are coming from White House and Canada's Generative Code of Conduct. You read the EU and so forth. And then later, we can talk about standard certifications. I don't think we are there yet as a university, or even as a country for that matter. But maybe we can leverage the previous 4 stages. And if you look in terms of the OECD AI principle, similar to the previous one, they are talking about value-based principles. To say, what are the principles that are defining who we are, what we do, and what we stand for? And their guidance there is on inclusivity, sustainable development, and well-being. And if you think, especially on the issue of well-being, have we also thought about, in terms of the mental well-being, on the introduction of these various AI tools onto students? There is an article that I read, and it is disturbing because some students are really pressurized. They are not able to cope. Of course, there are those on the positive side that are seeing the good developments. They are also guiding on human-centered values and fairness. And then the third one is on transparency and explainability is coming back So that to what extent are we transparent with whatever that we are doing? The issues of authorship, do we declare that we have used the AI tools? Like in some of the material that I got for this present, I had to use generative AI. In some, I had to go to articles and book chapters and so forth. The robustness, security, and safety is another principle, more like an angle or a layer, if you like, for us to think about. And how do we practice the issue of accountability? And then what they are recommending on the side, on the other side, on the right-hand side, it is our investment in research and development. And Tatebu Pape, I think this talk more into your direction to say, we are entering the season of budgeting now. How much are we budgeting for the licenses around this generative AI? You know, how much are we budgeting for taking colleagues to training conferences or webinars around this particular subject of AI and those kind of things? And I'm just using your office as an example, but of course, many others, we need to think about that. The digital ecosystem is more aligned to sustainable AI, to say how do we foster that? Enabling environment, in our case, we have got many, many policies as a university. And are these policies talking to one another? How stringent are they? Are we also thinking about how we are building human capacity for market transition? And this is what I was saying earlier in terms of the skills that we are imparting for as far as the qualification that our students are registered for. If you look at World Economic Forum, 21st Century Skills Model, there are a number of skills that they have added there that they propose that we should be imparting to our students. And if you look at our PQM, then you can ask yourself to say, is the degree or at a module level, is the module that I'm teaching even adhering to those 21st century skills? Amongst others is the issue of digital literacy, communication, and ethics is one of them. The international cooperation for trustworthy. We are not in a vacuum, and we ought to be part of international community. There are treaties, there are bodies. We need to belong somewhere, so that as when we come back, we know, in terms of those value-based principles, what informs them, and we are able to align our policy within that. Now, UN is then promoting a human rights approach to AI, and they're talking about 10 principles. In the interest of time, I wouldn't go through them, but they are against harm, safety and security. You see number 6, transparency and explainability is there again, responsibility and accountability. But what stand out here for me is number 9, awareness and literacy. And they say there must be public understanding of AI and data, so that the promotion is done through open, accessible civic engagement, digital skills, ethic training, media and information literacy. And we have got a space in the library where we can also use or create LibGuides as part of information awareness or digital literacy awareness. And that is another space. I talked about MOOCs earlier. Are we really having a center or a repository as a university where we contribute these MOOCs as part of our information awareness and so forth? So I think we've got a opportunity there. The UNESCO AI guidelines calls for actionable policies, and they propose about 10 areas that the AI guidelines could focus on ethical impact assessment, governance and stewardship, data policy. And you'll see, as you read these many frameworks policies, they talk about one and the same thing: responsibility, transparency, accountability. Those are common keywords that you'll get across. But if you look at number 6, in terms of gender, how do we make sure that we promote gender equity in the development of our guidelines, so that when we come up with some provisions, they are not so gender insensitive? Because how we gonna judge a mother who needs to take care of kids vis-a-vis Nikki who doesn't really take care of children and so forth. But both of us were using the same tools. So it's a matter of saying, in our policies, do we consider some of these aspects so that we can create that balance? But I must also caution to say balance is always difficult to maintain. So us as a university trying towards creating ourselves or positioning ourselves as an AI university, we are trying to inculcating the AI behavior from ethics point of view as part of our culture. And we starting with the issues around systems and infrastructure. Systems in the sense that we engaged with ICT from time to time, and we are sort of advising through our AI task team as an advisory body, but also as a portfolio as well. So we still make a call to say there need to be improvement there. The second leg, and which I think Prof. Letseka talked about earlier, it is more on harnessing policy framework. And that is why we started working on a position statement, the guidelines on the use of generative AI, the AI policy, the policy on academic integrity. And just last week, I was talking to the VP, and she wants us to look with the library now on the copyright and plagiarism policy. But also, there was observation to say that policy lacks the AI angle out of it, and is the issues of authorship that are silenced, the ownership there that are silenced, and so forth. So very soon, I think some of you colleagues, you will be called to be part of the team that is looking at reviewing that policy. And our advice was leaning towards to say we need to make sure that the policies speak to one another. They are not talking in isolation. The last element is there on education and awareness, as I said to say. While we are introducing the hard measures on the other side it's important that we do make sure that there is introduction of education and awareness, some through self-training, but some through CPD. So colleagues, that is the end of my presentation in terms of how we can approach the governance around AI and the issue of accountability. I think I'm starting to be like a broken record. Most of you who have attended my previous slides, you will know that this is a custom in terms of my parting shot as far as our responsibility is concerned. Thank you so much for being good guardians.
Thank you, Dr. T. I'll be now handing over to Ms. Tanya Kutsia, who will be doing the Q&A session and the closing. I'd like all our facilitators to come in front and Mr. Sidney Engelbrecht to switch on your camera for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Tandu. It's my privilege to close this session. I've already spoken to a few of you, and it was a very interesting session, I believe. We always wonder when we put together a program like this that we try to hit the mark. So in closing, I just then want to recap what we heard. So Mr. B opened this event to indicate that the use of AI tools open up the risk to abuse. Dr. Visagie then indicated that there is a decline in the trust of science. And then she likened this to me or you that is equalized to scientists according to the 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer. She identifies the pitfall in the use of Gen AI then that we don't know how to use it responsibly. Principles such as transparency and reproduction should cognitively be part of our armor. Prof. Moketsi was here and he actually coined what we saw, that we need that armor and that harnessing in some kind of tool to meander through all these pitfalls. So we should look at our agreements, our data agreements, data and mutual agreements, that we can optimize our research and that it can lead to responsible conduct of research. Sydney Engelbrecht regarded us through the rapid growth of the AI tools, as well as the advances of detection of AI. And he alluded to the large journal houses, such as Wiley, Frontier, and PLOS, that were retracting their published papers where there was AI detection, and they are running into thousands. He concluded by saying that we need to align our AI use with human intention and values. This is very important. I don't know where to page. Dr. Nikki, this will be fresh in our memory. He was asking, are we doing justice to our teaching and learning environment by acknowledging AI? What is our individual responsibility, and also as researchers, as managers, and also the collective responsibility of the institution? How do we balance the good side of AI opposed to the bad side of AI? Are we doing enough to harness our policies, our frameworks in the researcher lecture room, in the student communities? So we need to align our training and our access and awareness, and even mentioned LibGuides, which was actually an excellent idea. He mentioned that we also need to think about the psychosocial risks, the lonesome, the alone people, people that are sitting only using AI, missing the element of social debate. And we are there. My teenagers are sitting in their rooms and they're on their computers and cell phones. And it's not only that, it's also wider than that. That is the danger of techno-stress. And personal and privacy harm. We all have AI, but they do know what we are doing exactly every moment of the day. And he was concluding then to say that data and unreliable outcomes of our research and studies should be our concern, and that we need to harness our environment against these dangers. Thank you so much, and I'm going to open the floor for questions. We have Sydney not on the screen. I hope he didn't leave, but we have Rieta and Dr. Nikki here. Is there any questions that you wanted to ask them and waited for this opportunity? Sydney, you're there. Any comments or questions? Thank you. You can go ahead. Okay.
Firstly, I would like to say hi to everyone. And I'm a student. I am scared as hell right now after everything has been said and shared. So I just want to know, why have all these AI tools if we cannot use them fully? In a way, I think we can do without these tools, as they are conflicting with the integrity in research. Like Prof. Fisache mentioned that there is a lot of temptation to use text generated by AI. AI it can falsify text. And at times we don't get the opportunity to justify our work, especially in the undergrad. Because now our work must be submitted to turn it in, and whatever the score you get is the final one, especially after submitting your final document. And there's nothing that, as a student, I can do, because I'm not being given the opportunity to justify, to say, no, I didn't get the 53% from getting information from AI or being assisted by AI. I got it from my own thoughts, obviously, and from the research papers. So we don't get the opportunity to justify that. I don't know if it's done in the, I'm a newly MND student, so I don't know if I will have an opportunity to justify my work. So I also need to know that, is paraphrasing AI-generated text ethical? The last one is that I am just in love with Grammarly, and I am aware that is AI generative tool, but it's also an editing tool. So is it ethical for me to use it for my dissertation? Because I have written it, I have referenced all the sources. I just want Grammarly to make it look nice and readable in a, you know. I don't know the right way to use it, but I mean Grammarly to make it look readable in a professional manner. Because, you know, like you said, Dr. Jano, that, you know, some of us English is our second language. So when you're writing, you cannot write like an AI does. So, yeah. Grammarly, please, must be the number one. I want to know, because I'm using it.
Yeah, I think let me take the first one, and it's crucial that you are asking, and it goes back to say, those that are coming up with the guidelines, do we even understand how these tools operate? Because if we do not understand how these tools operate, it goes back to what I was saying to say we will then perpetuate injustice. You get the point? So it is good that you ask to say, is it ethical? Maybe that's the first part of the question. And I think for me, the answer will be to say, the use around it, that's where we need to look at continuum of ethical and unethical. How do you use it? And if you check further, most of the guidelines and policies, they are promoting it, but what they are also asking or encouraging authors is to state upfront that, please note that I have done X, Y, and Z. You get the point? So that's the part that we need to address. But in response, and as you say, you love Grammarly, it's a matter of us. You know, we are busy developing AI policy and the guidelines. We have finished on aligning them with policy on academic integrity. I think Dr. Fisach will talk about it, because one of the questions that you also asked is that, will I be given a chance, you know, to defend? And as they say in law, he who allege must prove, isn't it? So there is student disciplinary committee, of course. If you are caught, then they will say, so and so you are caught, you are suspected of X, Y, and Z, and you need to state your case. But ideally, that should be the last resort. We shouldn't even get there. And that is why I emphasize the importance of training and awareness to say, how do we educate each other on the use of these tools? How can you use ChatGPT or Grammarly, as you said, in a more ethical way? And one of the best practices is, as you say, you come with your own text and you put it there for, you know, to put it nice, as you said. But then, and in one of the webinars, one of the students asked if indeed Grammarly is an AI, and if you then understand and read better, it is an AI in the sense that it studies patterns and the order of words, and that is how these AI tools are trained, because some they are trained, some they are not trained, supervised versus unsupervised. You get the point? So it's a matter of us then say, if we come up with a policy that say, if we caught you having used ChatGPT or Grammarly, this is what's going to happen. But I think we need to unpack and make them clear to say, to what extent can you use them? And if you are using them, what are the potential pitfalls that you need to be aware of? You know, so that it is clear upfront what is expected of you and what is not expected of you. I think, yeah, those are the questions that I wanted to address.
We will give Sid a chance as well. I think what I want to argue is that if we consider the transhuman theory that Nikki brought in, he was speaking about individualism and autonomy. And I think what we need to do is we need to add another aspect to that theory, collectivism, meaning that we will need to get together as a scholarly community and engage in what is seen as acceptable, practices and whatnot. Because as Nikki said, it is about the way that you use it. We are all using Grammarly. I don't think anyone in this audience would not use Grammarly. Grammarly is absolutely an amazing tool because most of us are not first English speakers, and we have challenges in terms of how we write. But I think important then is how do you utilize it? So I know that, for instance, Quillbot, you can take a sentence from an article from another author. Takes us away to utilize our own resources and our own ability. So I think for students then, they should become part of this discourse and dialogue. I am jotting down some ideas. I think we should have Tuesdays with AI and maybe have short sessions, just maybe 1 hour sessions where we invite students, we invite scholars, and we actually engage on these things, because I can't really give you an answer to say, you know what, it's ethical to use it or it's not ethical to use it, because I know that we use it, and I know that I would argue it becomes probably less scholarly. I don't even want to use the word ethical, but less scholarly if you just take text and you put it in and you paraphrase it and then you quote the author, because you are now not using your own ability actually to use paraphrasing as a skill, but it's an academic writing skill. So this is what I want to say about, and I hope I've answered your questions. So Sid. So we're going to hand over to Sid.
Tanya, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you. It's now good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to start with the last question about the use of Grammarly. I mean, that is so embedded now in Word that it happens automatically. So there are also other tools. I, for example, use Paperpel that is quite similar to Grammarly, and it also speaks to your question about paraphrasing in terms of using the word responses and then turn that into your own. For me, using these tools like Grammarly, Paperpel, it's not that one accepts all the changes that those tools propose. So there's still a sense of critical thinking that goes into accepting or declining a change, because based on the language, based on the context, it's not that it's a simple, I accept all the changes that Grammarly or any other tool propose. To me, it's about whether the sentence structure still makes sense, whether I still convey the message I want to with that particular text. So it's all about applying one's mind to ensure that the end product remains your work. And then in terms of whether or not whether these tools are accepted at your institution, one of the colleagues in the chat says it's all about the ethical and responsible use thereof. When we implemented our policies here at our university, we had a stakeholder engagement, we had the research community involved. We also did a global benchmark to see what is happening in the higher education sector at a global landscape, to see what they are doing in terms of their guidelines, in terms of best practices, and we then customize that or contextualize it for our research community so that we still convey the message whether or not we embrace, we engage with AI, or we alienate it. And our viewpoint is we embrace it, we accept it as a university, but we promote through our workshops, through our engagement with the communities, the responsible and ethical use of AI. I hope those responses are helpful.
Thank you so much, Sydney, and Nikki and Rieta. I just want to take a question quickly from the audience. We had 61 people that joined this session earlier today, and we still have 52 of them in the audience. So here is a question from Leah, which was just now commented on. So in the thesis document, where exactly should the researcher articulate or explain the use of AI tools?
I would argue that maybe in the methodology section it would be quite appropriate, but also where you discuss the ethical considerations. Because I think that the use of AI might have complications, as we discussed in the first session, for instance, concerning informed consent, privacy breaches, how you store your data, the specifics then around the ethical considerations, but definitely also if you use it as part of a methodological tool. You would, for instance, if you use Atlas.DI, you would indicate that you are using Atlas.DI. So I would then argue that that would be appropriate in that section as well. I don't know if anyone would also respond to that, or are you happy with that response?
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? You can go, and then that Prof there.
Thanks. I want to be a bit more controversial in the sense of I'm always almost at a stage where I want to ask the university to ban the use of AI. And Sydney used the example of a calculator. I'm so glad you used that because that is a good example. I have kids in primary school. Every single day they do maths without a calculator. And they do that throughout their school career. I've done calculus and whatever at university without a calculator. So it is there. Anyone can use it. But why don't we use it? Because we've learned how to do certain calculations and certain things. We have learned certain skills before we can use that. So yes, there is a use for a calculator. Dr. Sorry, I want to use your example. For instance, you mentioned that you were in front of this decision to use the AI or not. You're an expert in ethics. You're an expert in all these things. You are going to an international conference. Now we put that situation in front of a first-year student or a second-year student. What decision is that student going to make? That student is still, let's say, grade 1 in maths. Now you give him a calculator. Now you ask him, use this responsibly. We give it to our second-year students, our third-year students, our fourth-year students. Very few of them have the skills to be able to make a decision if it's ethical or not. So what are they doing? They're using the calculator. Why not? It's available. It's acceptable at this stage. When you started, you asked who used AI this week. I have not, but for the past 3 weeks, I have been fighting with students on using AI. I have not used it, but it's a complete mess. I'm a coordinator for instance, a fourth-year module where the students need to do a research proposal. And all I'm doing is fighting AI. The students don't know how to use it. And exactly, I want to use the example of the calculator again. You have a fourth-year student. They've not done a literature study before in their life. Now you want to say, oh, it's a tool that you can use to improve your literature study. They've never done it before. So how can you expect a student to make an ethical decision if they've never done that before? So, and I'm concerned. That is our fourth-year students. And they are quite aggressive. They are quite fighting about it when they are caught out using AI. There's now, Tunisian is fantastic now. You can I mean, you can use now the similarity, when the text is altered, when they use AI, it can all be detected now. So we have now at least the backup of that. Previously, we didn't even have that. And still the students are fighting. I had a student that had 100% AI, and she was fighting with me. She just did not paraphrase correctly, and she worked so hard on this. I had the evidence of it's 100% AI. Still, she doesn't understand that you cannot do that. It's not acceptable, but in their minds it's available. It is there, it's so easy. I need to submit a literature study. Why can't I use that? Why do I need to learn how to do a literature study if I can just produce it and submit it? And if it's not detected, I'm going to get a very good mark for that literature study. So until we have governance, principles, policies in place to govern our use of AI, especially on the student level, I want to argue, please ban it. Because I don't think at this stage we are doing any good by using AI tool. They say our students are grade 1 on maths. Now we give them a calculator. They are not using the skill, and they're not building the skill. And we are talking about our thought leaders. We are talking about our intellectuals that we are training now, or that we are trying to skill by skipping steps and saying, oh, it's okay. It's a tool that you can use to improve it. Improve what? You do not have even the basics. So, and I've listened to all of this. And more I get involved with AI, and I see that the more I get concerned, especially in the higher education environment, and especially at Unisa. Academia, the academic at Unisa has been carrying this university. A lot of our support structures are not carrying this university. If AI is influencing that and even infiltrate there, then I'm really concerned about a distance education university and the quality and the perceived idea of what we have out there. Everyone thinks our qualifications are just still good, our students are good. If this thing is coming in of our students are used or are allowed to use AI and it's acceptable, I'm concerned about the perception out there about our qualifications and our academic offering as well.
I'm just going to very briefly respond that I agree with you, specifically concerning the skills and developing the skills of the students. Because that's why my answer was concerning the paraphrasing. If you don't learn this skill, you will never learn it. You will always take text, put it in a ChatGPT, refine, rephrase, and you will never learn that skill. And that, I think, is the ugly, it's probably the ugly of it all. And I think that we must try our level best to prevent that in higher education institutions. So let me hand over to Nikki.
Prof, I think, you were profound in how you raised and unpacked issues. And it's good to hear different views or opinion, because, week in, week out, we have this kind of meetings, workshops, presentations. And you are saying you are almost at the stage where you say, let's ban it all together because of those concerns. And you will recall, I did mention to say, and maybe you are fully in that category, who's worried to say, what is it that we are teaching these students as they get out of the university? Are they here to get a paper in the form of a certificate, or will then they be able to demonstrate skill that they have learned? In your case, it's a research module. And I think in all of this, what I hear is also, and I'm now talking from a university point of view, where we are now in the VP's office, we are in also a research space, the absence of guidelines as well, to say, to what extent can you use X, Y, and Z? And if you use it like you're asking, is it ethical or not? We are still not clear. But also if you link that, availability of tool is another. But how you use it becomes more prevalent, at least for me, in terms of what is that we're promoting. Because you give example of a calculator. You know, Italy at some point also, was it Italy? I forgot the country where it was banned altogether. And they had the reasoning. And it goes back to what I also found recently in research, to say more and more students are worryingly become over-reliant on this tool. You give them a question, they just go type, and what they are not even aware of is a concerning matter that these tools are very often hallucinating in whatever, because they are trained to go and fetch a response. So they are not programmed to say, I don't know, but they will find something and give it. And are we then training to say, the information that you get, to what extent are you cross-validating it? And those are the things that we need to be teaching. And this is why I said, once you have got the guidelines that specify in what conditions can you use, and if you were to use it, to what extent. And again, in my parting shot as well, policies alone, as I said, may not address the problem, but it depends on over and above policies, guidelines, as we say, what more are we doing? Perhaps we need to rethink, as I said, what is it that we want to be identified with as a university one? But also to then say, is that not threatening the mere existence why we have got academics? But then they argue on the other side to say, I've worked hard. Maybe we understand working hard differently. But also, which we throw it very often, the use of responsible use. And perhaps we need to unpack it further to say, what do we mean by responsible use? And I will give you an example. They say, don't drink and drive or drink responsibly as part of their adverts. But do we understand what is meant by drinking responsibly? Because drinking is drinking at the end of the day, and I will engage in some activity of driving or doing other acts. So, yeah, I'm just sort of following your line of argument, and also now being part of these many teams that are trying to come up with policies. Perhaps we also need sort of an independent voice like you, trying to argue. And I hope by the time we put those guidelines and policies on INTCOM, please give us robust comments as far as you can. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Chanu. Thanks also for the insight, Prof. Sydney, do you want to add some words, or are you from KALST?
Yes, Tanya, if I may. Remember I mentioned that in our case, we did a benchmark to look at other universities in terms of what they are doing globally. And the example that I referred to with the Russell Group universities in the UK, Cambridge, Oxford, King's College. So those universities, when ChatGPT was launched in November 2022, in March, they banned the use of ChatGPT. And why they did that was as an interim measure until those universities have policies and guidelines in place. And you now have seen that it was only in October last year that they came up with those 5 principles to decide whether or not to accept the use of ChatGPT, and if they do, how it will be facilitated by the university. And that is a key aspect that I think all universities or exercise or approach that universities should take to first see what the university needs to do and put policies in place before we openly accept the use of AI for academic purposes, for research purposes. And we have seen also the pushback by the journals to what extent ChatGPT can be used, because some journals will tell you only for images or for data analysis. Some journals will tell you not for text generation. So one needs to be clear and give clear guidance to our research community. And the university should be in a position to know what the stakeholders want.
Thank you,
Thank
Sydney.
you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Is there a hand? Let us just go to the hand here. So I'm going to, because we're running a lot, we also have other workshops. So last question. Thanks, Prof.
Mine will be short, because I think it has been a mouthful. What you said, it assisted us greatly, and especially for the lady who said she's a student. I'm just wondering if you will consider having such for our students, because the biggest problem is with our students. The biggest problem is with our students, because I've seen, for example, a student getting 1% just because of the high AI. So I think the people who need this the most are our students. So are you considering maybe doing that for their benefit? Thank you.
Yes, there is actually currently a course being developed on academic integrity. And this will become a compulsory course for all the first-year students, and it will also address AI. But that will not be sufficient. We will need to have various awareness and literacy building sessions for our students. And I'm thinking, Tandu, maybe you must find out in CGS if they have offered for our postgrad students AI research courses, because if that hasn't been done, we will initiate that.
There's one last question in the chat, and then we can wrap up.
This one? Wait. Okay, this was on the Turnitin. I think we can address it from our comments. We can address this. Okay, we will address this. We will writing back. There are rules and stuff, and we don't include all of those in Turnitin with the similarity index. So yes, and thank you for that. I think if there's no other hands, burning questions, this is a wrap-up then. And thank you so much for being attentive, and also for the audience staying on virtually. We always have big support from our research community. We always hope to serve you better. And Dr. Chano, we need that.